an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I think this is probably one of the most misunderstood concepts outside of Judaism.
So there's a tractate in one of the Starim of the Mishnah called Seder Nezikin. It's called the Order of Damages. And it has various mesechtas. It has tractates. One of the mesechtas is called Bava Kama, the first gate. The first gate deals with property, with a person being responsible for their property, that the property doesn't damage other people's property. In that tractate, there is a discussion about this verse, chapter 8 maybe, about an eye for an eye. And it's very clear that it means money. It doesn't mean an eye for an eye. The question would be, though, that why did the Torah express it in that way? If it's not literal, why didn't the Torah just say that if a person cuts somebody's arm off or they pluck their eye out, that they should pay? Instead, the Torah says that it should be an eye for an eye. We can maybe speculate, or we could just say that the Torah wants to communicate to us the gravity of the crime. The gravity of the crime is the person really deserves to lose their eye also. Because that's what they did to the person. The other person lost their eye, they should lose their eye also. That's not the way the law goes. But that's how terrible they did what they did was.
Just to clarify there, when you say that's what the law says, that's what the guidebook, the operating manual for humans that God wrote, tells us.
Yeah, we're discussing, like we introduced the Torah.
So none of this is somebody helped prompt God with an editorial here or an insertion there. The core data is divine and from God.
Let me just say like this. You're bringing up an interesting point, which might be beyond the scope of our discussion. We believe that the God's law is divine, which means that it precedes the existence of the universe. The same way that God precedes the existence of the universe, because God, think about it, before God created the universe, there was no universe. So God's existence preceded the existence of the universe. The laws of God are coming from God, which means that since they come from God, they also, the same way that God precedes the existence of the universe, his laws do also. So when somebody damages someone, it's not that it's a reaction that God says, oh, look, so-and-so damaged someone. We got to make him pay. It doesn't work like that. There is a godly truth before even the existence of the universe that a person who damages has to pay. So it's not, like you said, making up for something or reacting to it. The law is already on the books even before it happens. If you wanted to plug in into truth and godliness, that's what we're doing when we're following the law.
So if we go to that example of the dog bite, you're walking with your family through the neighborhood, and God forbid, a dog, an aggressive dog, shows up out of nowhere, attacks one of your family members. My layperson's understanding of it would be the father of the child who got attacked would go to the rabbi and he'll ask questions like, was the dog on a leash? Has he bit before? Were there witnesses? Is the owner, was he supervising the dog? Was the dog with one of his children? How old was the children? Was it at the neighbor's house? Which would then be weighed in ultimately a decision for damages, right?
Well, this is also discussed in the same tractate, but in a separate section. The truth is, before we even start the conversation, there is a law on the books that one is not allowed to own a dangerous animal. So if somebody owned an animal that can kill somebody, that animal would be prohibited to be owned, and it would be put down right away.
Rabbi, you're at risk. You're living in an environment where people randomly break into people's houses. They need protection. Under those circumstances, that sort of an animal would not be a deterrent and acceptable to own?
I'm not sure if it would. It would depend on the circumstances. But generally speaking, even in secular law, we have such things. I'm not sure if this is true because I'm not a lawyer, but I once heard that you can't have like a electric wire in your house that when the burglar breaks in, he'll touch it and get electrocuted. I don't think that's permitted. There are limits to the self-defense that a person can have. There are certain things that are not allowed, and a person is not allowed to own a dangerous animal. Now, if the animal would not be dangerous, whatever the parameters of that is, then in that case, we would just say that it would be just like any other animal that does damage. And then we would have to evaluate the damage that it does, and the owner would be responsible.